Hello and welcome back to Scouching's 2019 NHL Draft Recaps. Today we're going to be looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think pound for pound, the Toronto Maple Leafs had one of the better drafts of any team in the league. They didn't have a first round pick, but all things considered, I really like what they came out with. Leading the way at 53 was, I think, one of the more high upside players available in the entire draft in Nick Robertson. There were some analytics that I tracked that showed that he might not have the upside that you might want, which might have caused him to slip down a bit. He's had some concussion issues, but I feel like those things can be worked out, especially in a place like Toronto. But in terms of raw upside and skill and skating, I love what Robertson brings. I think he's a fantastic pickup at 53, and to me, many players worse than him objectively went off the board before he did. He's one of the youngest players available in the draft. He produced very consistently throughout the whole year, and in every game I watched of Peterborough, he was generating chances as well as pretty much anyone else I saw drafted in the first round this year. So I really like the pickup for Toronto at 53. At 84, they also went out and got a player that some people had ranked in the first round. I was not one of those people, but this is still to me a potential steal. Kokkonen is not necessarily the highest upside defenseman available, but he does produce very well against men. He does need to work on his defense quite a bit, but his transitional ability, his ability to break pucks out in his own end, and his play in the offensive zone are really nice. He's got good hands for a defenseman, and I think over time he could be molded into something very useful for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if not a top 4 defenseman. At 115th overall, the Toronto Maple Leafs took a player that I wasn't super high on relative to some others in Mikhail Abramov. Last year they drafted Semyon Darogachintsev as kind of an upside pick. Maybe he captures his game at his best, and I feel like it's a similar approach here. Abramov certainly is a good skater and has tremendous skill at times, and I saw some nice flashes out of him. Similar to Ryan Suzuki, he's a guy who made his whole line better. But I do think that there were some better players available at 115 that I probably would have swung on before Abramov, but if he can capture his game when it's at its best, he could be a really good pick here for Toronto. At 124th, Toronto took Nick Abruzzese, and I saw Chicago play a couple of times this year in the USHL. I never came away super impressed with Abruzzese this year, especially when you consider that he's a double overager, and I wasn't sure that this was the best pick for Toronto here either. But at 146, Toronto made a very interesting selection and took Mike Koster. Koster was a player that some people had ranked as a first round pick going into this season, and he was a player that really stood out on my tracking sheet. He involved himself in Minnesota high school hockey on about 45% of team goals with Chaska. Now when I went and actually watched some Chaska games, I always came away more impressed with Rhett Pitlick, so I'm not surprised Rhett Pitlick went off the board before Koster, and when Koster hit the USHL, it really felt like he had trouble keeping up with the pace of the game, especially in his own end. But when it comes to breaking pucks out and playing on the power play, he did show some nice flashes. He's a smooth skater, but he's not a fast skater. He's not the most dynamic player, and he can't really keep up when play gets really motoring, but he is young, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt and some time to develop. They'll have plenty of time to watch him do that as well, as he's headed to college, and I believe he's playing another year in the USHL with the Tri-City Storm, which is probably one of the better programs in the USHL. So I think it's a good pickup here in terms of value for Toronto. His high school metrics were well over a 20 NHL score, and it would have been perfectly reasonable for me to see someone swing on him in, say, the 3rd round of this year's draft, but to have him available at 146 is a good pick for Toronto. At 204th, Toronto took Kalle Loponen. The thing I love about the Loponen pick is he played almost the full season in Finland's 2nd men's division and actually produced pretty well for a defenseman. On paper, he shows up pretty well, and for Toronto to get him here is really good value. I'm not sure there's NHL upside with this player. I didn't really see anything that really brought me out of my seat, but he does have potential as a nice pace-controlling defenseman. He's a good puck mover and he can certainly put the points up. He will need to get stronger, better in his own end, but it could be an interesting pickup for Toronto here down the line. And that does it for Toronto's 2019 NHL Draft class. If you've watched Scouching reports before or any of the other videos in this series, you'll recognize the rating system. The number's going to indicate the overall potential of the class as a whole, and the letter grade's going to indicate the likelihood of the players reaching that ceiling. In all things considered with Toronto, I give them a strong 1D. They took a lot of risks here. There's some nice upside players like Nick Robertson and Mikhail Abramov and Mike Koster, although I'm not sure guys like Koster and Loponen or Abruzzese ever really turn into what they could be. It's a risky set of players, but Nick Robertson, if he works out, could be a player that should have been gone in the 1st round. Mikko Kokkonen, at his best, could be a player that should have gone in the 1st round as well, and coming away with talent like that could be a major win for Toronto down the line when they need valuable ELC guys. But I could also see all of these players having trouble adjusting to the pro game and it not really working out as well as you'd hope. Time will tell, but it is still extremely early. So that's it for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Next, we're going to be profiling the Colorado Avalanche. If you like the video, subscribe down below so you never miss another video. If you really liked it, you could support us on Patreon, where you get access to spreadsheets for drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as private chat rooms and plenty of other goodies. Or you could pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop. All the links are in the description below. So that's all for this one, and I hope you join me for the video where we break down the Colorado Avalanche.